The UK's data protection watchdog is planning to fine a software provider to the NHS over £6 million following data breaches and a ransomware attack in 2022. But what was involved in a ransomware and data breach attack, and why was an NHS software provider or any large company in the UK for that matter targeted? Well, Simon spoke to computer data expert and CEO Graham Stewart to find out what motivates large-scale hackers and why.
The NHS organisation in this case used a third-party provider to provide things like all the computing around 111. So when you dial 111, patient records, all of that, none of that is held by the NHS organisation. They outsource it like people, like your council outsources bin collection. So the council doesn't collect your bins anymore. They say to a company that specialises in bin collection, go away and collect the bins for us. So in this instance, they had outsourced their patient records and their 111 service to a provider. And what happened in this case is that the cyber security around that, so the defences that stops the bad guys getting in, hadn't been deployed in a good enough fashion. And so they were able to get in. And this is very, very common. Very common. There was an incident 3-4 months ago in London with Guy's and St Thomas's, where someone hacked into the third-party provider, and the phrase we use in the trade is exfiltrated, but you would in English call remove. So this information's been removed from the organisation. So in this particular instance, someone has hacked into the third-party provider, removed the information, and then I believe there was what's called ransomware. And literally, we've locked your machine. You need to give us some money to unlock it. And this is the standard operating approach. If you think of it in terms of a bank robber, there's a standard. You know, if you would see them in the films, they pull up in a van, they go in, they stick a gun in someone's face, open the vault, take the money out. There's a kind of a standard operating procedure, and it's exactly the same in this space. The stats that Checkpoint produced would suggest that the UK is one of the most targeted places in the world for these kind of attacks. The public sector is probably, alongside the financial services sector, the most targeted sector, because there's lots of personal data.
Now, I think the Ombudsman is considering or is going to fine the company. They're not fining the NHS, but they're fining the company that the NHS hired to outsource these things, the software company, is going to fine them upwards of £6 million. Is that actually an appropriate response? Is that going to work?
There's a couple of pieces in here. So the really important bit is, yes, it's an appropriate response, because the Information and Commissioner's Office, the ICO, will do an investigation. Will look at all the like you would in any kind of public sector regulatory area. They do a inspection. They look at the detail. They then go into who's at fault, what was the fault, what were the mitigations. So if they've said £6 million, that's a hefty fine, but clearly that's the magnitude of the failure. You know, the fine represents the magnitude of the failure. Personally, if they've been found to be in breach of the regulations and the law here, and to the extent that they've been fined £6 million, that's where it should be.
Two parts to this question. Why is the UK one of the most heavily targeted nations for cybercrime of the nature that you're describing? And two, why the public sector? Like, why the NHS?
So, okay, why is it one of the most targeted? We're an advanced economy. We've got a large amount of data so the use of information technology in this country is ahead, typically, of pretty much most of the other nations. So from what's called a digital economy space, we're one of the most advanced digital economies in the world. There are other countries in the world that are slightly further along, but what you've also got is the multiplied by factor, which is we're a very large, very rich economy. So there are, give you an example, Estonia is a very, very digitized economy, but obviously it's a very small economy. And there are a small number of people, which leads on to why would you go after the NHS? And the reason you go after NHS is that the information that they hold is extremely valuable. So if you think of it in terms of, you, Simon, have been to the hospital, you've got a complaint, you go in there, that information is deeply personal, okay? Multiply that by 90,000 instances or 1 million instances, suddenly that information has a value to it, because the bad guys can then do something else with that down the line. They can send you a text message going, oh, Simon, bad news about this. We can reschedule your appointment. Please click on this link to reschedule your appointment. And you go, oh, God, right, I need to do that. You click on the link and a secondary attack happens. So you've got the type and size of economy that we have multiplied by the fact that this information is really valuable to the bad guys.
You're watching London Live News with a reminder of our top story coming up after the break. And we find out what the RSPCA is doing to tackle animal cruelty this summer.